the sovereignty of the people of Uganda and their inalienable right to determine the form of governance of the country. 2, the supremacy of the Constitution as an embodiment of the people's sovereign will through regular, free, fair elections at all levels of political leadership. Political order through adherence to popular and durable constitution. 4, political and constitutional stability based on principles of unity, peace, equality, democracy, freedom, social justice, and public participation. 5, arising from all the four above, the rule of law, observance of human rights, regular, free, and fair elections, public participation in decision-making at all levels, separation of powers, and accountability of the government to the people. 6, non-derogable rights and freedoms and other rights set out in the extended and the expanded Bill of Rights, and the recognition of the fact that fundamental rights and freedoms are inherent and not granted by the state. 7, land belongs to the people and not to the government, and as such, government cannot deprive people of their land without their consent. 8, natural resources are held by government in trust for the people and do not belong to the government. 9, the duty of every citizen to defend the Constitution from being suspended, overthrown, abrogated, or amended contrary to its provisions. And 10, Parliament cannot make a law legalizing a one-party state or reversing a decision of a court of law as to deprive a party. It is absurd, honourable members and the distinguished participants, that for a considerable period of time, the foregoing principles have not seen the light of day. It is those principles that have guided our situation analysis and informed our conclusion that the regime in Kampala is deliberately restoring and railing all efforts geared towards electoral and constitutional reforms. A reality that requires going back to the drawing board to address the pertinent issues of governance bankruptcy, and editorial tendencies. I have been sharing with comrades here earlier that as the opposition and all of us would desire change, our requirement to meet cannot be any more urgent than now. Even if we met for a whole day and quarrel as the opposition, it is okay. So that at the end of the quarrel, we find new motivation and fresh perspective. Very, very important. Honourable colleagues and participants, and the nation deliberated on the constitutional framework that was promulgated in 1995. On the face of it, and all intents and purposes, our constitution was destined for success. As a constitutional practitioner and legislator, I know that the constitution gains much respect if it stands for a considerable period of time without amendments. But I'm aware also that this revised document can be amended if the dictates of time and the people wish so. But unfortunately, in the case of Uganda, ours has been amended on the whim of one person, General Museveni, and for his personal benefit. I don't find it tenable to wait for the constitutional review by government. Over the last 3 years, there have been attempts by government to initiate constitutional and electoral reforms. It is this deliberately obscure stance that has prompted some of our colleagues, like the Honourable Nwagaba Wilfred, to initiate constitutional amendment bills. We remember and recollect so well the people's the document that contained the people's wishes that was launched at Africana, I think in 2016. We're also aware of individual members' efforts, Dr. Rumebayiga's effort towards the presidential transitional bill that Parliament then considered as being personal to the person of Museveni and therefore rejected. So these efforts cannot be left to die in vain. I believe that Parliament, led by the opposition, should assert its role and sufficiently apply itself to the legitimate demands of our time. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and honorable colleagues, our actual program is impressively rich. I encourage you to actively engage in all these discussions and debates, share your experiences, raise your frustrations and perspectives, and not hesitate to ask questions, even when those questions are most unsettling. This is the space to have these questions raised so that we can correct our path. Ladies and gentlemen, I truly believe that this interaction will leave us with better people and with better perspectives to reflect on the big obligation of rescuing this nation that hangs on the threshold of an existential crisis as an independent and durable nation-state. I want to thank you for finding time to share in this conversation. I don't take your time for granted. I would like especially to thank our distinguished invited guests for sparing this time to occupy this space with us. And I hope after here, it will be occupying space outside the Parliament and other spaces. I thank you so much and wish you very great and fruitful, very fruitful deliberations and outcomes. Thank you so much. Can I take the honor to therefore invite my party president, the Honorable Robert Sentam, to officially come and make his remarks and open this retreat, the Honorable President.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Leader of Opposition. Dear comrades, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, allow me and kindly receive my apologies for delaying. I was supposed to be here a few minutes earlier than when I got here, but considering the matters cover up of the entire city, I was late by a few minutes. Please take my apologies. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to address you as one of the many voices agitating for change in our country, Uganda. Today, as we enjoy the elegance of this five-star facility to discuss governance issues, we must not lose sight of the harsh reality that we face. The reality that surrounds us, ladies and gentlemen, is important to put in notice. I want to remind all of you, brothers and sisters, that we live under a military dictatorship. It disregards the rule of law. It undermines all institutions of state. It is family rule. I repeat, we live under family rule. We are only allowed to be here today just because the regime does not consider this gathering a serious threat to its main and only objective, and that is staying in power. In terms of democracy, Uganda has gone back to 1973, 50 years ago. Yes, we've gone back to the Amin days. The only difference is that the Idi Amin of today is a little bit smarter, more calculative, and more deceptive. He will allow you to discuss democracy, reforms, and all that, especially if it is away from the masses. But you can be sure, ladies and gentlemen, that all the beautiful ideas that we share do not go beyond these beautiful rooms. We discuss them here, and because the regime feels threatened by them, they usually end here. So that reality should remind all of us that our first and main duty should be removing the Museveni dictatorship. I repeat, Those harsh realities that we face should remind us that our main duty, and the first duty we should consider, is to remove the Museveni dictatorship. But for as long as the dictatorship remains, then we might as well forget about any meaningful reforms. Some of you might say that I present a rather pessimistic image of our situation, but I want to invite all of you to review Uganda's political history since 1986, when General Museveni captured our country by force. For 10 years, until 1996, General Museveni ruled uninterrupted without any elections. And then from 1996 to 2005, he ruled as a leader of a one-party state. Now, this lack of electoral accountability for 20 long years is what set stage for the problems that we are dealing with today. Between 2005 and now, we have witnessed 4 presidential elections under the multi-party system, all of them conducted on a very unleveled playing field in favor of General Museveni and his NRM candidates. Each of those elections has been a sham election, only legitimized by a judicial system that has proven time and again to be part of the problem rather than being a solution. Since 2005, the regime has employed various tactics to suffocate the opposition and to limit the ability of the opposition to engage with the electorate. Opposition candidates and their supporters have been intimidated, they've been arrested, they've been subjected to military violence and murder. Dr. Besigye, who ran against General Museveni 4 times, was repeatedly arrested, physically assaulted, maliciously prosecuted, and his campaign rallies were disrupted by security forces. We all remember that it got even worse when I challenged General Museveni in 2021. The presidential campaign was turned into a war zone. We were tear-gassed, we were arrested, beaten, pepper sprayed, shot at, and our supporters were massacred in their hundreds. By election day in 2021, the regime had already switched off the entire internet, banned all media from relaying results live from the field. It also banned any telecenters except one media house, which was used to telecast fake results in favor of General Museveni. From 2021 elections alone, we have more than 100 of our fellow citizens lying in graves after the regime ordered a massacre on the 18th and 19th of November 2020, just 1.5 months away from the general election of 2021. Today, as we speak, hundreds of innocent young men and women are still languishing in prisons just because they identified with us during the election. Needless to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that the abductions of people accused of supporting us is still going on, even as we speak in this beautiful room. So, given that history, I am convinced that this is a battle for the soul of our nation, and this is a battle that we must win. I'll say that one lesson that we have learned from the experiences of those that challenged Museveni before us, and from our own experiences, is that for as long as Museveni regime is in power, Uganda will never experience fair electoral processes or even uphold constitutional governance. Why? Because this regime sustained itself in power by denying its opponents fair political competition. So, the first thing to do, and I say this again, the first thing for us to do is to remove the Museveni regime, and only then shall we expect respect for any sensible political discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the cornerstone of democracy is a constitution that guarantees the rights and freedoms of its citizens. Our constitution should be protected from manipulations and amendments which serve the interests of individuals as opposed to the interests of the nation. Friends, Ugandans yearn for a country where no one is above the law, where the judiciary operates without fear or favor, ensuring that justice is served to everybody. We must change the way our judges are appointed. We must establish a system that can genuinely hold the executive responsible for its actions. Ugandans yearn for a country where there is electoral integrity, where every election is a testament to the will of the people. A country where the voice of the people is respected and where their votes carry the weight of their hopes and their aspirations. We want a country where democracy thrives, where the media is free and is a conduit for the exchange of ideas, fostering a vibrant political discourse that enriches our nation. We must redefine the role of our national security institutions. They should not be used as tools of oppression and suppression. Instead, security forces should be protectors of our democracy, not obstacles to the same. We want an independent electoral commission that is free from political interference. Members of the electoral commission should be selected through a public and impartial process conducted by an independent body. They should be people of demonstrated integrity, committed to upholding democratic principles and values. They should not be appointed by the president. The people of Uganda should be free from intimidation and violence when they go for elections. All forms of intimidation and violence should be condemned and punished. The rights of every voter, regardless of their political affiliation, must be respected and must be protected. I know that even in this room, ladies and gentlemen, this room where we are, I know that we have varying levels of trust amongst us. But I must say this to you today, that we are not here just to pass time or to pretend to be politically mature. We are here because Uganda needs us. We are here because our country is at crossroads. We have a duty, ladies and gentlemen, to collectively give direction because all of us have an equal stake in this, our country. Our country needs us at this defining time, and each of us must honorably and decently play their role. So, I want to call upon you today, ladies and gentlemen, and to all well-meaning Ugandans here and those watching us on the media, regardless of their political affiliations, to join forces and rid our country of dictatorial rule. The road ahead, ladies and gentlemen, will definitely be challenging. There will be resistance from those who benefit from the current mess, and those are many. But I'll tell you that we must not be guided by our fear and apathy. Let us always remember the words of the great Nelson Mandela. He said, "It's always seeming impossible until it's done." So let us not be eye-shut by the challenges and the fear that we face today. Let us rise above our differences and build a nation where the will of the people prevails, where every voice matters, where the dreams of our forefathers can be realized, and where every citizen can participate in political processes without fear of intimidation. Ladies and gentlemen, democracy is not a privilege. Democracy is a right, and it is a right for everybody. Unfortunately, we are not going to get this on a silver platter. We will have to endure the challenges. We will have to go through so much. But I guess, and I believe, that we will find and achieve it. We will achieve this for ourselves and for the generations to come. I thank you, and I wish you fruitful deliberations today. Thank you very much. So God and my country.
applause for the NUP President, the Honorable Robert Chagulanyi Ssentamu. Nkamo chawise abyogedde. We would like to really appreciate you for that energetic presentation at the opening of this retreat. And just so I can tell you, Mr. President, about all the things that you have said and what we need to do, the women in the opposition have taken things in our hands. So we have decided to lead you in this struggle because we think that's what we need to do. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we are running out of time. We would like to welcome the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform. He's here with us. Thank you for coming, and thank you for always being with us. We are now going into presentations. And I'd like to invite Professor Mwambusha Ndebesa, Senior Lecturer on Political History at Makerere University. And I know he has serious issues about how we have managed time. I'd like to apologize before you come to the podium because I know you'll make comments about that. We apologize, and after his presentation, we'll have a few reactions, and then we'll go into a short break. Otherwise, thank you very much for your patience. For those of you who have colleagues who are outside here, we are streaming live. The link is going to be shared by Sadap Chitatakaya. We are also live on different media, on BBS television, on MBS TV, and other televisions. We are live on the parliamentary link, Parliament of Uganda. We are also live on Alternative Government, so you can share the link so other people can join the conversation of this retreat about constitutional review and electoral reforms. Professor Ndebesa, you're welcome.
Good morning. Is this mic working? It's not on?
It's on now. Sorry.
Thank you, moderator, the president of NUP, the presidents of the other political parties, the leader of opposition, dear participants. I'm glad to be invited here to share some ideas about constitutional issues in Uganda, especially regarding constitutional amendments, some historical assessment, and I want to say that those who invited me may have invited me as somebody who is merely knowledgeable about maybe constitutional developments in Uganda, but they probably didn't know that actually I participated in the making of the 1995 Constitution, not as a delegate, but as a researcher, and actually I was the leader of the research team. and I have some background, some of the goings on in the making of that constitution. Behind the scenes, some things that even the delegates may not have known, and I've heard them being distorted. I can mention one here before I go to present. There was the issue of age limit, and many people, the general perception in the country has been that it was meant to keep away the late President Milton Obote from standing. I must say that is wrong. That provision was put in the 1995 Constitution because of myself, because of me. I'm the one who influenced and shaped its being there. It was tabled by Mayombo. I am the one who sent him a message. I had a background. As a researcher, of course, we were not talking, but I had a background that President Habib Bourguiba of Tunisia had become senile in office and nearly led to a crisis in Tunisia because he could appoint a minister. The following day when the minister comes to see him, he would say, "Who are you? What have you come to do, by the way?" Until his vice president and other officials picked him and took him to his house, and the vice president took over. But much more important, I had a foundation and a background. I come from the former kingdom of Mpororo. There was a kingdom in the pre-colonial period in Uganda called the Mpororo Kingdom. It was actually the biggest, the largest in Uganda then. It included the present Ntungamo district, present Rukunjiri district, present Ruchiga district, present Shema district, present Bushenyi district, and some parts of Rwanda. It was a large kingdom. Where did it go? For the first time in the history of kingdoms, it disappeared, disintegrated without invasion, without a rebellion. Why? The king then, Kahaya Rutindanjezi, had ruled and become maybe 90 years, become senile. His sons wanted him to leave office, he refused, until it disintegrated in his hands and it just disappeared. Now the people of Mpororo Kingdom are former Bahororo. Can you imagine an identity disappeared because of senility of a head of state, a head of kingdom then? So from that I advised that it was put there and it was passed. Let me go to what I was supposed to present today. I wanted to give you that background. Constitutional amendments in Uganda, an assessment, but with a question. Why have the constitutions in Uganda failed the test of time? As you know, constitutions in Uganda have failed a test of time. I will hurry because there is no time. Definition of a constitution, we are not going to go into details about that. A constitution is a system of basic principles, rules, and organizational arrangements. A constitution is a body of fundamental principles, norms, and laws that guide the government. Some countries have written constitutions, and others have unwritten constitutions, but the best thing is that all countries have constitutions. There are some who say UK doesn't have a constitution, or Israel, or New Zealand. That is not true. They have a constitution, only that it is not written. But even our pre-colonial societies and kingdoms had constitutions, but they were not written. They were in their hearts. They were norms, and there is no society, organized society, that doesn't have that. Some countries have institutionalized them into one document, and for others, it is found in different laws, conventions, and codes. The Constitution is the highest law of the land. Those are just statements. Constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is about the balancing the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. Constitutionalism is in the spirit, is in the values, in the norms. A constitution should not be just about the articles and clauses, but also the spirit behind these articles. There are those who say it is well laid down in the Constitution. It is very clear in the Constitution. No, it is not clear. And there are those who take the Constitution to be only the written clauses and articles and subsections, written words. Do you remember, those of you who have read the Bible, doesn't matter whether you are Christian or none, but most people have read the Bible, you know how Jesus castigated the Pharisees? The Pharisees were those who were referring to the law as written on the paper, not as law written in their hearts. And Jesus said, no, what is important is not the law as written, it is law as is in the hearts, as in norms and values and principles. And therefore, those who always refer to the Constitution are like the Pharisees that who refer to the law as written. We want the law as written in the hearts of the people, therefore a spirit of constitutionalism. What is the letter of the law saying, and what is the spirit of the law saying? Such that our judges shouldn't just be like our Pharisees. When they are making constitutional judgments, they should also refer to the spirit of the law. They should go and check with the Hansard to find out those who made the Constitution what they had in mind when they put their age limit or term limit or indeed other laws. Otherwise, merely by going by the letter of the Constitution is missing the point. The functions of the Constitution, I will just, in the context of Uganda, the Constitution is an instrument of nation and state building, building inclusive, equal, and cohesive societies. The Constitution is an instrument of democratization. The Constitution can be an instrument of conflict resolution. Conflict resolution, let me make a point here, not suppressing conflicts. You know, sometimes when a regime suppresses conflicts and contains them, it thinks that there are no conflicts. No. The conflicts are not resolved through coercive machinery. The conflicts are not resolved through hard power. The conflicts are resolved through soft power. Have you convinced everybody to be on board? Is there a political consensus in the country? Have people accepted to live together? Is the state legitimate in the hearts of the people? Otherwise, merely suppressing conflicts and you think everything is okay is like the proverbial ostrich which hid its head in the sand and thought people are not looking at it. The Constitution is an instrument of power sharing and distribution. The Constitution as an instrument of establishing a just economic political order. The Constitution can be used as an instrument of distributing and regulating power among different branches and levels of government. And the Constitution establishes how a state can exercise power, and the Constitution regulates relationships between the citizens and the state. I would have elaborated there, but we don't have time. Let's look at the foundational principles, norms, and values for constitutional amendment processes, because this seminar here was convened to look at issues of constitutional amendments and how we can forge a way forward. So let's look at foundational principles, norms, and values for constitutional amendment process. Let me first make this comment. The South African Constitution, which has been one of the best constitutions around, before it was promulgated, actually before it was made, they had first agreed on principles. They had 34 principles. They first agreed on the principles before they started deliberations. And they agreed that after the Constitution has been promulgated, it would have to have a judicial review, where the judiciary, the Constitutional Court, would look at the constitutional provisions and scrutinize it, find out whether they were aligned to the principles agreed upon. Otherwise, if you write a constitution without agreeing on principles, that constitution can be violated without recourse to any checklist. So, these include popularized this concept in the public sphere of being participated. Participating and being participated are two different things. You can be called for a meeting like this one, and you sign a document and they say you have participated when actually you were participated by the organizers. So a constitution should not be made in such a way that you participate citizens. They should participate genuinely, not be participated. It should have inclusivity, respect of popular sovereignty of the people, rule of law. It should be conflict of interest free. This is a very important norm. Conflict of interest free. If you amend a constitution in such a way that actually you are amending it to serve you as an individual, then that constitution has not stood on firm ground. Others are common or public good. It should be amended in order to promote public good, not selfish or individual interests or private good. It should be for justice for all. Unity in diversity, because Uganda is a heterogeneous country. We need to accept pluralism and accept that we should have unity in diversity, broad consensus, shared values, justice, equality for all, fairness free from manipulation. You can have people participate, but you participate them through manipulating them. We don't want a constitutional amendment or constitutional making where citizens are manipulated and therefore participated. There needs to be checks and balances, separation of powers, civility, norms of civility, not militarism. It should be corruption-free. Corruption-free. You, our members, not necessarily these ones who are here, but members of parliament, in the past, when the constitutional amendments were taking place, they were paid, and they accepted money, and went. And do you think those are going to make a genuine constitution? But that is even payment. You can also be bribed politically. You can have political corruption. Most people think corruption is about embezzlement of funds. No, you can abuse office also. And we are going to see it below when we come to each of these constitutions. I'm going to elaborate more below. Ethical foundations of the constitution. A constitution making an amendment should also be based on political ethics. Political ethics are missing in Uganda, or have been missing. These include, but are not limited to, conflict of interest I talked about, honesty. People are not honest. I might miss mentioning this one because of time. Let me mention about honesty. When they were amending, when Parliament was amending the constitution for the age limit provision, I went and actually exchanged views with the committee, the legal committee. And I told them, they were telling me, but we are legal. They were Pharisees now. But we are legal, we are the ones supposed to make this amendment. What is your problem? Now I told them, but you are not honest. Why were they not honest? They were saying, they were arguing that they were amending the constitution because they didn't want provisions that make the constitution rigid. So I reminded them that that article, is it 101? Was it 101 or something like that? The same article where there was age limit, there was also education limit. In the same article, there was education limit besides age limit. There was also another limit where they would limit a candidate from standing. So I told them, if you are honest, why don't you suggest that all those articles, clauses be removed, because they were limiting, because they were not honest, they were dishonest. Respect for human dignity, integrity, corruption-free, manipulation-free, it is I have talked about them. Makers or reviewers of constitution should be statesmen and women who look at building for the next generation and not politicians looking at the next elections. I will be commenting a little bit about, for example, the constitutional amendments that have taken place throughout Uganda in history. Are you looking at the next elections or the next generations? In most cases, they have looked at the next elections. Now let's go through a timeline of Uganda's constitutions. From around 1958, the process of making the constitution began. There was the Wild Committee report. I don't know how many of us have read the Wild Committee report. A committee led by Wild, somebody called Wild, a gentleman called Wild, which was preparing for the form of government and elections that would take place in 1961. It was chaired by Wild, but it had Africans on it, especially members of the Legislative Council then who were Africans. The likes of Milton Obote were on this constitutional process of Wild. Then in 1961, there was a Munster Commission report, equivalent to a Dutch report. It was the Uganda Relationships Commission report. I wish most of you politicians can read that one. When you read it, you could predict that there would be constitutional instability in Uganda. That commission report was very clear about the confusion in Uganda, led by Lord Munster. It is the one which ushered in the 62 elections, the independence, the independence, constitutional and independence elections. Now, in 1963 was the first amendment of the 1962 Constitution. Let me make a correction. There might be some people here who have been making a mistake like those I have seen even in the media. There are those, I wanted to ask you a question by the way, but you are too large. I wanted to teach now and see how many people knew. There are those who think that Kabaka Mutesa became the president of Uganda in 1962 at independence. It's wrong. He became the president in 1963 after the 62 Constitution was amended. Otherwise, between 1962 and 63, the Governor General remained as the head of state. That is a mistake that people have been making, and I want to correct it here. Now, that was the first amendment of the 62 Constitution. And then in 1966, the Constitution of 62 was abrogated. Another mistake I have seen in the media and the public sphere. They think that the Pigeonhole Constitution was a 67 Constitution. Wrong. The Pigeonhole Constitution was a 1966 Constitution, not 67. The 66 Constitution was meant to be an interim Constitution. Then it was replaced by the 1967 Republican Constitution, which was drafted by the executive, presented to Parliament, which sat as a Constituent Assembly, debated it for about 1 month, and passed it. So the 67 Constitution is not the pigeonhole. The 67 Constitution was debated by Parliament. But let me make a comment on Parliament before I forget. You, members of Parliament, I am glad I'm talking to you today. You have accepted to be used by the executive. Parliament of Uganda has been corrupted, has been rubber stamped. Now, the 1967 Constitution was debated and passed by a Parliament, first of all, 66. The 66 Constitution was presented to Parliament. It was in the pigeonhole, that's why it is called the pigeonhole. And the members of Parliament were asked to pick the draft in their pigeonhole and pass it. And members passed it without debating it. The only few debates that were there, a member of Parliament would stand up and say, even if I have not read the Constitution, I support it. Come on. You have not read and you support, so what are you supporting? Members of Parliament, that I have supported it. What have you supported now? Anyway, it was passed in 1 day. That is 66. 67. The 1967 Constitution was debated and promulgated by members of Parliament who sat as a Constituent Assembly, and you know what they did? If you don't know, members of Parliament extended themselves into office for another 5 years without going for elections. Members of Parliament. Is the Parliament of Uganda serious? They said now we don't want to go for elections. Since you have given us an opportunity, we have been extended for 5 years. That means it was illegal. They extended themselves illegally. And then the president, who had become a president after abrogating the 67 constitution, 66 constitution, was also extended in office for another 5 years without going for elections by the members of Parliament, elected by the people, honorable members. What is that now? I have told you, maybe that is the politics, the Ugandan way. In 1971, Idi Amin came in. For him, he didn't pretend to be democratic. There was no pretense. He just abolished the constitution. Let me rule by decrees. I am the constitution and everything. So the constitution was abolished. Also, I'm told somewhere, somehow, he was using that constitution. It appeared as if he abolished it, but he was using it behind. He abolished certain things that limited his power. In 1979, the 1967 constitution was reinstated, but with provisions arbitrarily suspended under legal notice number 1 of 1979. So the constitution was reinstated, but with amendment without consulting the people, of course. In 1985, some provisions of the 67 constitution were also suspended by NRM. In 1986, sorry. Legal notice number 1 suspended some parts of the 1967 constitution without, of course, consulting anybody, the citizens. Now, in 1995, a new constitution was promulgated. But the 1995 constitution has had more than 100 amendments. Somebody, I think, was talking about 119 or so amendments in a period of less than 3 decades. Other constitutions have lasted 200 years and amended about 9 times. Uganda's constitution, within less than 2 decades, was amended by more than 100 times. Is that still the constitution? Another influence I had in the constitution, by the way, let me tell you, through the late Honorable Adokomechon, I think. I also sent a message to him to the effect that RDCs are very important people at the district, and they wield a lot of power and influence. Why should we have anybody as RDC? So I proposed to him that an RDC should be somebody who qualifies to be a senior public servant. A senior public servant qualified by the Public Service Commission. What do I see now? It was removed. It is now open-ended. Anybody can jump very high and become an RDC. Those are the challenges we have had. Let's make some small assessments and we'll complete as we don't have time. We assess the constitutional making process and amendment processes in Uganda. Uganda has been defined by constitutional instability in its 60 years of independence. Constitutional instability. It is against that background that actually the 1995 Constitution was made. I think in the preamble it says, recording the political instability in Uganda, the citizens hereby, but we have forgotten about that preamble statement, recording our history of political and constitutional instability. We just make amendments as if there has not been constitutional instability. We have read history without learning from history, unfortunately. The Ugandan constitutions have failed a test of time. Ideally, constitutions are not supposed to be amended easily, just like it is done for the ordinary laws. But in Uganda, we just wake up and amend the constitution. That creates constitutional instability. This instability is partly to be blamed on the constitutions which were based on shaky foundations, which are called maram. You know a maram road? In a maram road like these ones of my friend there, the road mayor and his friend, she's called what? Saka? There are maram roads in Kampala. You know, when it rains, just once, the rain is off. That's a maram constitution. Maram foundations instead of concrete foundations. If you write a constitution, amend a constitution based on maram foundations, then it will be washed away. But if you write it on concrete foundations, then it will stand a test of time. Unfortunately, our constitutions have been written and amended on a maram foundation, like the roads of the streets of my friend there. Not meant for you. The maram foundations of Ugandan constitutions. Really, maram, not concrete. The 1962 constitution was based on maram foundations. It was a constitution based on compromises rather than principles. It was less participatory, there was no integrity, there was manipulation. I'm talking about the 62 constitution. Those who manipulated the constitution, especially, were those in power. Mainly, the colonial state, the British government. The British government manipulated that constitution of 1962. You know, people went to Lancaster. I don't know why they were moved from Uganda, but even in other dependencies, they used to be removed. Now you have this same peasant person, a primary teacher, going to Lancaster, traveling in an airplane for the first time, is in London, and he's mesmerized by the environment, and you expect that person to make a constitution? And he starts listening to the colonial secretary speaking English through the nose. And then there was Archbishop of Canterbury. I'm an Anglican. I'm not talking about him because I'm against the Archbishop. The Archbishop of Canterbury was manipulating, was very powerful because he didn't want to leave a Catholic at the helm of power in Uganda. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the Secretary of Colonies, and another powerful force was Buganda Kingdom. They manipulated DP and Chiwanuka until the constitution was a Maram Chiwade constitution of 1963. We are not going to go into the details of 62, sorry. There was a lot of manipulation. The 1963 amendment was based on injustice. It was not participatory, no consultations, there was conflict of interest, it was full of manipulations, did not consider the context of Uganda. I'm talking about the amendment in 1963, when it was amended in such a way that they put a provision that the president of Uganda would be elected by parliament as a constituent college from among the traditional leaders of Uganda. That is the day when every community had a traditional leader. Even the Bachiga who didn't have, they had Rutachirwa. Even the Bajisa who had, they had Umukuka. Even the Rangi who didn't have, they had somebody with ostrich feathers. You know, everybody became monarchized in order to be like Uganda. It was a copycat syndrome. You know, even those who didn't have monarchical states, they all of a sudden became monarchized. Why? Because they wanted also in future to have a presidential candidate. Why would a tribal leader be the president of Uganda at the same time? Why weren't Ugandans allowed everybody to stand as president? Why for me, a commoner who is not common, would not in the future stand as the president of Uganda because I had somebody to represent me because he was a king? That was unjust It was not participatory. And therefore, it was on a Maram foundation. And no wonder it was abrogated in 1966. There was a conflict of interest. There were manipulations, and did not consider heterogeneity of Uganda. We could go on and on and on and on. Oh. The amendment was not steeped in known and consensus, in known principles. There should be principles there, and there was no consensus agreed upon on principles and norms. Why did the presidency remain among traditional leaders and to be elected only by parliament and not by society? But also this business of Westminster model, where you have a president and a prime minister, I think was not suitable for Africa. Indeed, where it was left, whether in Zimbabwe or in Africa, whether in Kenya, wherever, it was later removed. Where you'd have a constitutional head of state together with a prime minister who was executive. By the way, there are those who make a mistake and think that Obote in 1962 up to 66 was a mere prime minister. Obote was not a Nabanja. Obote was not a Rugunda. Obote was not an Amama Babazi. Obote was an executive prime minister, the one who actually appointed ministers and could even disappoint them. He had control over security forces. He was an executive prime minister, like we have the executive prime minister in UK. Not the head prefect of ministers. Now, to have such an executive person, and then you put the ceremonial head of state with all the powers, two bulls in one cry, in the African setting, it was not easy to survive. And it didn't survive. It didn't put the context of Uganda in mind. So, anyway, that was the 63 amendment, and it did not stand the test of time. It was abrogated by Obote, the executive prime minister, in 1966. And he just abrogated the constitution. Complete. He had just abolished it because he had a quarrel. He had exchange with the Kabaka who doubled as the president of Uganda. It was not easy for Kabaka, by the way. I appreciate his position. To be a leader of a tribe and be the president of Uganda at the same time, it was not easy to balance the two. Indeed, in 1964, there was a referendum in the Lost Counties in Buyaga and Bugangezi, Chibare district now, and Kagadi, and the people voted to go back to Unyoro, and the president refused to assent to the referendum results. And the prime minister said, since you have refused, I am going to sign. And therein, they had a conflict. Two bulls in one crowd, and they couldn't survive. They fought each other because in UK, for example, they have had a lot of time to internalize that value, but it could not work here. So the constitution was abolished. I'm not going to go to the history of what happened. And I have already told you how it was passed in parliament without people reading it. Definitely it was not consultative. It was based on Maram Foundation. It did not pass any democratic principles, but it was supposed to be a stopgap measure. The process was unconstitutional, undemocratic, and procedural, and principled, and civil. There was no separation of powers, etc., etc. That was 66. 67 now, the Republican Constitution. But if you hear even Uganda's constitutions, how they are called: Independence Constitution, Pigeonhole Constitution, Republican Constitution, Museveni's Constitution. Hey, when shall we have a Ugandan Constitution? That's how we name them: Independence, Pigeonhole, Republican, or Obote, and Museveni Constitution. The 67 constitution making and amendment process violated many constitutional principles and norms. There was no consultation with the people. The draft was made by the executive, debated by the parliament, which had expired, but because they wanted to extend themselves without going to the people, You may think that was 67. Is that so? Do you know this last parliament, it was 11th or 10th parliament? 10th, you were there. And you passed a constitutional amendment to the effect that you have extended your term by another for 7 years. Yeah? Self-interest. Self-interest. These members of parliament think we are not following up on them. They extended themselves. What else would they have done? But the Constitutional Court squashed it. But they were repeating the 67 one. You see? They have learned history without learning from history. The term of the executive and the parliament had expired. So it was made by illegal organs anyway. There was a conflict of interest as both the president and parliament had self-interest in extending themselves into office without seeking for another mandate from the population. This was a typical case of political corruption. It was unethical. The constitution was later abolished in 1971 by Idi Amin, who never pretended to be democratic. He had learned from his predecessor Obote how to violate constitutions with impunity. For him, he never pretended that he was a Democrat. The NLF government now, Uganda National Liberation Front government of 79, amended the 67 Constitution in 1979 by issuing legal notice number 1 of 1979 and continued with the 67 Constitution. It was a takeover of government and a revolution. Anyway, when you take over government, you suspend certain constitutions through legal notice number 1 of that year. And you rule. There was another takeover in June of 1979 without regard for constitutional arrangement. Rule was removed after being in power for 68 years. Days. I'm told that record was broken by this lady of UK. Otherwise, it was the first record in the world. Liz. There was another takeover in 1980 by Muwanga, who said that it was not a military takeover, but some kind of takeover. There was no constitutional consideration. And there was that constitutional instability in that short period of NLF period. The 1967 Constitution was again amended by the legal notice number 1 of 1986 by NRM revolutionaries with no regard for constitutional principles or procedures. It was simply, they used the 67 Constitution, but with that radical change, using legal notice number 1, without consulting anybody. There was no parliament even. Later, by that legal notice, they constituted a new parliament, the National Resistance Council. And you remember the National Resistance Council, the Speaker of the National Resistance Council was President Museveni. Did you know that? If you are counting the speakers of Uganda's parliament in our history, President Museveni was a speaker. He was the president, executive head, at the same time, the Speaker of Parliament. That was NRC. That prepared the 1995 Constitution. How could that Parliament pass, they used to pass what? What were they called, those laws? They were not ordinances. The British ones were called ordinances. These ones were called what? NRC what? Statutes. So that is under that circumstance. The Constitutional Committee, there was a Constitutional Committee, you remember the Odoti Committee, which did consultations and made the recommendations, the draft, but it was partisan. The Constitutional Committee members were appointed by the government, by the executive. And I think all of them except one were NRM activists. But even the DP who was there had been labeled as a good DP. You know, when President Museveni called somebody a good DP, what it means. So there was a good DP who joined the NRM people. How? He was appointed on the Constitutional Committee and he was a good DP. The CA delegates were elected, that is true, but under the movement system and restrictions of parties. Parties were restricted. The CA, the Constituent Assembly, was chaired by the late Wapakaburo, an NRM original, and Professor Mako as the vice, an NRM also. And all the committees were chaired by NRM people. And they said this was inclusive constitution. That was a Maram Foundation. There were walks out. Even at one time, NRM walked out. There was opposition walk up. Yeah, at one time, I don't remember the incident, but also there is a time NRM delegates also walked out.